Russia, a huge land of flat plains, icy tundra and thick forests. It's a big and powerful country with a history as exciting and complicated as its landscape. For many centuries, strong rulers from the mighty Tsars to the tough leaders of the Soviet Union have shaped Russia. It's a story of big wins and terrible losses, revolutions and bouncing back. This is the story of Russia, a trip through time. The story of Russia starts with the East Slavs. These were groups of people who lived in Eastern Europe over 1,000 years ago. They were traders, farmers, and strong warriors. In the 800s, a group of Vikings called the Varangians came to rule these Slavic tribes. They started a powerful country centered in Kiev, called Kievan Rus. This was the first Russian state, and it would become the base of a powerful empire. Kievan Rus was a busy center of trade and culture, connecting the Byzantine Empire in the south with the Vikings in the north. Kievan Rus wasn't prosperous forever. In the 1200s, a powerful force came from the east, the Mongols. Led by the famous Genghis Khan, the Mongol armies were unstoppable, conquering everything. The Mongols, known as the Golden Horde, conquered the Russian lands. For over 200 years, the Russians lived under Mongol rule, paying heavy taxes and suffering harsh treatment. This time, known as the Mongol Yoke, greatly affected Russian history and culture. As the Mongol Empire got weaker, a new power rose in the Russian lands: Moscow. The princes of Moscow were clever and wanted power. Slowly, they started to gain control. They worked with the Mongols while secretly getting stronger. One important person was Ivan Kalita, who made Moscow the center of the Russian Orthodox Church. This gave Moscow religious power, which helped them unite the Russian people. By the late 1400s, Moscow was strong enough to fight the Mongols. Under Ivan III, called Ivan the Great, the Russians finally broke free from Mongol rule. Under a series of powerful czars, Russia continued to expand its land and power, but it was Peter the Great who really made Russia a major European power. Peter was fascinated by Western Europe. He traveled there in disguise, learning about their technology, culture, and military. He came back to Russia wanting to modernize his country. He built a new capital, St. Petersburg, which he called his window to the West. He changed the army, brought in new technologies, and even changed the way Russians dressed and shaved. Peter's changes were big and sometimes harsh, but they made Russia a major force in the world. For centuries, the Tsars ruled Russia with total power. But the 1900s brought an end to the Romanov family and a time of great change. World War I was a disaster for Russia. The economy crumbled, millions died, and the people lost faith in the Tsar. In 1917, revolution swept through Russia. The Tsar was removed, and a new government led by the Bolsheviks and their leader Vladimir Lenin took over. The Bolsheviks promised peace, land, and food. They were communists who believed in a very different society, one without private property or social classes. The Russian Revolution led to the Soviet Union, a huge communist country stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. The early years of the Soviet Union were full of civil war, famine, and political repression. But under Joseph Stalin, the country went through a harsh period of forced industrialization and collectivization. Millions died, but the Soviet Union became a major industrial and military power. During World War II, the Soviet people played a key role in defeating Nazi Germany. After the war, the Soviet Union and the United States became rivals in the Cold War. The Soviets launched Sputnik, the first satellite, and sent Yuri Gagarin, the first man, into space. Even with its achievements, the Soviet system had big problems. By the 1980s, the Soviet economy wasn't growing, and the country was stuck in a war in Afghanistan. Mikhail Gorbachev became leader in 1985, wanting to fix the system. He introduced policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, but his reforms caused changes he couldn't control. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, breaking up into 15 independent states. The collapse ended the Cold War and greatly changed the world. In Russia, it started a time of political and economic trouble. From the end of the Soviet Union, a new Russia came about. Under Vladimir Putin, Russia has become powerful again in the world. But Russia today has many problems, from economic inequality to political repression. Its relationship with the West is still complicated and often unfriendly. The story of Russia isn't over. It's still being written, shaped by its long and complex past. As Russia moves through the 2000s, the memories of its history, the Tsars, the revolutions, the wins and the losses are still important. Only time will tell what happens next for this big and mysterious land.